Hey folks, it's Ray with Taste Radio. Right now I'm on a call with Alexander Harik, who's the founder and CEO of Zesty Z. Alex, how are you?
Yo, what's up, Ray? I'm great. Thank you for having me. How are you?
I'm doing great. So great to see you. Hopefully we can see you in person pretty soon. By we, I mean the royal we, I mean me,
Yes,
because it's been a while.
it has been. The last time I saw you was Winter Fancy last year, I believe.
Yeah, in January of 2020 in San Francisco, which
Yeah.
feels like it was maybe 5, 6 years ago, even though it was only like, 14, 15 months ago. So
Yes. Yep. I remember you buzzing by the booth, and you were on your way, but and then you came back, and and that's where you met my mom.
I did meet your mom, yes, who was very involved in the company as well.
Yes.
And I wanted to know, and I wanted to share with our audience a lot more about your company.
Cool.
I've admired you guys for time, amazed at everything you guys have accomplished to date.
Well, before I jump into that, I've got to say this is a special session. I've known you for about 3 years, and the rest of the Nosh family has been really supportive of Zesty from even pre-launch in 2016 when I was just this boisterous person on the pitch stage as a finalist. So everybody has been super awesome at Nosh, and it's always nice seeing everybody. I just had to get that out of the way. And I definitely might call you Habibi during this, podcast, which, in Arabic is just, like a dear friend, like a homie. So it might slip out. So just wanted to give you the heads up on that.
Thank you. Thank you. It is a term of endearment. So
Yes.
I'm not offended. I'm overjoyed actually to hear the term. So thank you.
Thank you.
Where did the name Zesty Z come from, by the way?
So Zesty Z came from Zesty Zaatar, and I just cut it down short. I don't have a background in food or marketing or like nothing. I had no background in this at all. It was sheer force and determination, and passion that led me along this way. I always thought the name would be Zesty Zaatar, and we would only sell Zaatar products, and that would be great, and we would become famous. You could do that. Little did I know that wasn't really the path, and how it really works. But Zesty Zaatar, I thought was a little too hard for people to say. And so I just chopped it down to Zesty Z, which connotates something a little bit more fun, a little more playful. And people love the word zesty. And quite frankly, within the food space too, and in our community world, literally people just say, yo, zesty, And so they know that, like, that's who I am. So I'm sometimes called just Zesty or the Zaatar guy. I was born and raised here in America, so my lens is different. I want to do something modern and different that no one's ever done before. I'm appreciative of the culture, and I understand where that comes from, but I'm not that past generation. I want to move things forward, and I also want to educate people and bring people into the culture to kind of help with those stereotypes. So how do you bring people in? You got to meet them where they're at. You got to make it like approachable. So when they think of Lebanese food, or they think of zaatar or Arabic food, oh, Zesty Z. Like, yeah, there's that super energetic founder from Brooklyn, he's really loud, but his flavors are great, like that's what you want them to say, not something else, and not pigeonhole you or not grab your item on the shelf because it, has a certain look and a feel to it. You want to educate people by bringing them into the culture to change those norms and kind of change those perceptions. And I felt the best way to do that was partially meet folks where they're at.
So if they don't have an opportunity to meet Alex from Zesty
Yeah.
Z, Zesty
Yeah.
being your nickname, when you're talking about approachability and education, a lot of times all you do have is your product on shelf. So what does approachability mean in terms of package design?
You got to stand out. You got to stand out. I think that you need to be super descriptive and do something really contrarian versus what your competition is doing. And I think we do that for all of our products. So our popcorn, our seasonings, and now the condiments, everything we do is meant to stand out. And so also on each of our packaging, there's a little bit of story, which great brands do this already. Add a little bit of heritage to that, talk about it, and then also ways to enjoy. I think that's super helpful too. Like we have QR codes on the back of our products that take them to recipes. So I think with all three of those things, it's not rocket science, but I'm super proud of our designs. They are really bold and colorful, and they definitely stand out. They also match my personality.
So you knew what you wanted to say from a label standpoint. In terms of formulation of the product, how did you know that you had a viable brand? How did you know that you were ready to go to market? What were the key elements?
So I think the key things that we looked for was, and this is talking about our zaatar condiment, was did it taste great to me and mom? It was her recipe. She's my co-founder. The demo feedback we got from strangers and retailers we sold into. And was it unique and did it stand out? And if folks bought again. So those are the key elements we looked at. Now, what happened for us is in 2016, I quit my finance job to start working on Zesty Z. The product launched in 2017. We were operating in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, at a factory there with a really wonderful community of other food entrepreneurs and startup brands there. And we would manufacture the condiment, drying the zaatar, blending, and figuring all that out, which is probably a story for a whole other day. But once you figure that out, what did you do? So we would manufacture on weekdays in the evenings. And then the other days during the week, I would literally take a blue IKEA bag with, little gift bags that were green with little pita chips, recipe cards I had designed, little info sheet. And I researched the top 30 independent stores in Brooklyn and Manhattan. And I would walk into their stores and sell hand-to-hand combat, and offer to do a demo. Hey, this is a zaatar condiment. You've never tried anything like it. X, Y, and Z are the reasons why you should do it, and I'll do a demo for you.
What went into that research? When you said you researched the top 30 independent stores, what were you looking for?
I was just looking for independent stores that sold specialty type of products. I mean, it was a lot of Google Maps and Yelp. There's not a lot of rocket science, or anything fancy. It's just these are the stores. And a lot of those stores were pretty well known. So you would walk in and they would be willing to take a meeting or at least sample the product.
Did you have to know the buyers, the retail buyers ahead of time, or the founder or the owners of the retail stores? Or was it something where you could just walk in and say, hey, I'm Alex with Zesty Z. I'd like for you to try my product?
You could just walk in. I walked in most of the time. But also because these specialty stores, there was a bit of a food renaissance in Brooklyn around that time. So a lot of these independent specialty stores and cheese shops were getting written about in local press. So I would do some research. I'd figure out who the manager is. Sometimes it wouldn't be accurate, but I would write a personal note and I would leave it and then follow up. And that's how we got into our first 30 stores. It was... I'm lugging this blue IKEA bag around in the middle of the hot heat riding subways. And, you had to do it. And that's how we got our first 30 accounts.
Your first major retailer was Whole Foods, like a lot of brands. Talk about that story. Talk about how you got into your first few Whole Food stores.
This is before we had any product. There were a lot of trade shows going on in Brooklyn. And at the time, Ellie Truesdale was the local forager. She's pretty well known in the food. I call her I think of her, and sometimes when I see her, remind her the godfather of so many brands, or
Yes.
the godmother, whatever. I think of Vito Corleone, right? It's just
Well, Ellie has definitely moved onward and upward, as a partner with Almanac Investments now. But yes, her name pops up in so many different ways. It's really amazing to see the impact she's had on our industry.
Absolutely. And so, I met with her at an event and she was super cool. She could tell I was passionate, and it was one of these one-on-one mentor things. She looked at the product and saw, this is really interesting and different. I really like it. Global flavors, Mediterranean diet, and zaatar were the kind of trends that she identified. But she told me, she goes, your label's not that sweet, so you should try to fix X, Y, and Z things. And I remember what it was. I had, enjoy with on the side of it, how to enjoy it. And instead of listing out how to do it, I had these, graphics, that were printed on it. She's like, yeah, take those graphics off. So I did that, and I went back to her and I got her information, and she saw I was hustling pretty hard and gave us a shot, put us in the local Brooklyn Whole Foods. the one in Williamsburg and the one in Gowanus. And so, we demoed our hearts out. The response was great. We were generating some buzz in New York. And then at, one of the trade shows, Summer Fancy, we got a chance to meet people on the global team, Christine in particular. And again, people who knew zaatar, and she certainly knows a lot about it. They were all like, "What the heck are you doing? Like, I've never seen anything like this before." And so I think for a chain and a partner like Whole Foods that embraces local and innovation, we've had a tremendous experience with them. And they really saw what we were doing. And then she asked me, and then other folks there too, is like, "Where do you want to take this?"
And your zaatar seasoning is in Whole Foods nationally at this point, correct?
Right, right. So we jumped from 13 New York City stores of our zaatar condiment in the beginning of 2018 to over 400 less than 12 months later.
I think being in 400 plus Whole Food stores is an amazing accomplishment. And you and I have talked about this in the past. There's a question about velocity, right? If you have one product in the condiment aisle that not a lot of people are familiar with in terms of what it is, as in zaatar, you might only get a handful of turns, a handful of products sold per week. So in order to really get Zesty Z where it needs to be, I think this is where the question of how do we turn a product into a platform is something that I think a lot of entrepreneurs question and try to figure out. So what were the first steps? What were the initial thoughts in terms of how to get there, how to get to that platform of Zesty Z?
So you're absolutely correct. I mean, that first phase, that first inning, was like my MBA program, like that was me going to grad school. Like, wow, okay. Now it's like, okay, I've got this living, breathing company, people are taking us seriously. How do you get to the next level? So I studied what, Dang and Siete did. And I looked at some other brands and just generally what works in food. And so I looked at the velocities and I saw that beverages, snacks, and like bars, are generally always in the top velocity moving products. So now taking this Mediterranean idea and flavor, experience, bringing it to all of that, how could I do that? Well, by process of elimination, I wasn't going to make a protein bar or like a grain bar. That was not my thing.
Zesty Z protein bar. I think that was probably a good move, Alex. I don't know how many people would have bought that.
Yeah, nah, it just wasn't going to work, right? So like, okay, beverages. Okay, sure. Is there something you can do? I was like, man, I don't want to do beverages because I had learned through the condiment in my MBA program, basically, transportation, refrigerated and frozen. So I didn't know that going in. So I was like, okay, wow. So I don't want to do this. And I don't want to compete for space in the refrigerator or frozen section just yet. So I'll leave it with that. And so I said, okay, snacks. I was like, okay, snacks. And then I just would walk down aisles. And I was walking down, the snack aisle. And I went to, see what Siete and Dang were doing and great inspirations again. But then I looked at some of the other areas. I pulled some IRI data too. The first time I started looking at data. And I just thought to myself, I'm like, okay, if you're going to do this the right way, you're a flavor brand and you have bright packaging and you want to do the Mediterranean diet. So it's got to be slightly better for you. So I walk down the aisle and you start with like the chips. So many great brands, but like the kettle chips. I didn't want to do anything fried, and they already have great flavors. Then you would go down to the puffs. At the time, there were some other great brands really doing puffs. And I was like, oh, hell no. Like, I'm not doing puffs. And so then I was standing in front of the popcorn section and it just slapped me right in the face, this wall of cheddar. And I said to myself, why on earth are there 6 types of cheddar popcorn, 5 types of salt, and like 4 types of, sweet something kettle? All great brands. They're very big CPGs. They're obviously doing something great, but using my innovator lens and knowing my disruptor kind of DNA, I like to call it, I was like, you have got to be kidding me that somebody has not innovated in this space and it's a healthy snack. And so that was the original inspiration. And I knew that, the 2 bigger brands there, kettle cooked, so oil cooked, they're popcorn. So I was like, wait a second, if I can air pop this, and then I had flashbacks to when my mom used to air pop at home with the air popper machine. It was like this yellow kind of thing. You put the
Yeah,
kernels in and it air pops. We'd have our Blockbuster videos.
sure.
Mom didn't let us get like the buttered popcorn that you'd microwave or like the candy. So I had just these really beautiful memories of my childhood and really authentic. It's honest to God. Like, I mean, this is how we would have movie nights. And I just was like, wow, what if we did an air pop popcorn and use, zaatar to start on it? And so that was where the inspiration first hit. And I went on a year and a half R&D journey trying to build this product and to actually create a seasoning that is zaatar, that is not just the dry herbs and seasonings you sprinkle on it, an actual real seasoning. And then two other flavors, which eventually came out to our Mediterranean popcorn. We have a spicy Mediterranean, we have a cheesy feta, and we have a savory herbs, which is zaatar. And so that was kind of my moment where I was like, wait a second, this has some legs. I bet you there's a lot of people who don't like eating snacks that taste like foam and salt, and who knows what the difference between white cheddar and yellow cheddar is. I mean, like, give me a break. Like, it's 2020. I mean, it was 2018, right? I mean, it's like, look at this age of technology, And even now, we're sending people to Mars and doing things, and we're still eating the same popcorn flavors from 20 years ago. It's like, come on, like, you got to be joking. So that's kind of the approach and kind of the attitude I took.
Well, we haven't sent anyone to Mars just yet, so maybe that's the reason we haven't seen a real shift in the amount in
What do you mean? You know what
quality.
I mean? Like Perseverance, the rovers. I mean,
Sure.
come on, we're doing cool stuff like this,
Yeah,
and we're still
absolutely.
eating, like the same old cheddar popcorn from 2004, 2005. I mean, like, come on, it's like the scene from what's that movie, Crazy Stupid Love? It's with Ryan Gosling and
Sure,
Steve
yeah.
Carell, and he's like, "You're better than the Gap," like, and he like slaps him like he's going clothes shopping. And it's just like, come on, you're better than eating the same old like cheddar popcorn. Come on, you're better than eating just salt. Like, wake up your taste buds. So that's kind of the spirit I went into R&D with.
I want to go back to your heritage and your experience as a minority founder in the food industry. You touched on some issues with discrimination on a personal level. And I wonder if that's at all carried into the food industry. Certainly, I hope not. But I mean, what has been your experience as an Arab American minority founder?
Well, it's been overall positive within the food community. I think that, being in particular Lebanese, but then part of the larger audience of being Arab, food is really part of the culture. And you grow up with that hospitality where like a guest comes to your home, it's like their home, my house is your house type of philosophy. And showing food is love is something on all of our packaging as well, is something my mother and grandmother taught me growing up. So that's like the first piece. People are, really interested in our food, and there are some cultural reasons why people in this industry know Lebanese food and Arabic food. The second piece is there's actually quite a bit of Lebanese and other Arab business owners in food and CPG. We're known as, I guess, as a group, to be very entrepreneurial. And so it's been awesome connecting with folks on that level as well. So in particular, within food, it's been really overwhelmingly positive. And I think, especially with the trends of global flavors and Mediterranean diets, people are certainly more open to it. Stepping out of the food CPG microcosm, where maybe that is, our culture and our foods and our flavors are more embraced, naturally, because this is a hot take. Most immigrants brought the great food. I mean, brought the foods to America that we love. So of course they're going to be, more open to it in this industry. You think of like sushi, tacos, again, very high level, hummus, things like that came from other cultures.
Well, outside of indigenous food or Native American food, yeah, it's all immigrant food, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's what it is. I mean, you could go back and take a look at it. So, My one friend Amrit and I were talking about this and we were joking about it. So immigrants brought flavor to America. So again, reiterating that point, within this community, it's been great. At a larger level, just as an adult, and then as a business owner, yeah, of course, there's been discrimination. I think I mentioned it. We were chatting earlier. Offline, I get stopped every time I go to the airport. Still, there have been certain comments that I've worked as a business owner. Knowing that we import and do business in that region of the world, people making assumptions or comments about that. So it has not been completely pleasant. And I never shy away from letting people know, about my identity and my culture and my heritage. There's a wonderful saying in Arabic, and it's up in our office. It's he who denies his heritage has no heritage. And so while I'm certainly grateful and I love, the American side of, my identity, the Lebanese Arab side has given me so much. And we were raised that way. And so because of 9/11 and subsequently after, the wars in that part of the world, and living in the New York tri-state area, unfortunately, me and members of my family and friends, have had to deal with some nonsense. So, I mean, that's just the way it is.
Well, Alex, I think the best way to beat back discrimination and racism is to educate and inform. I think people are often scared of what they don't understand. And the more that we can share the cuisine of the Middle East with people, it might be the easiest way to introduce them to a culture in a really compelling way. And I congratulate you on doing that.
Thank you for that. And, we are working outside of Zesty. There's a couple initiatives that I've partnered up with. And I know, I'm going to be asking you for some of your help. So I know I can count on you. But
absolutely,
bringing people together to encourage entrepreneurship within the Arab American community, especially with the younger adults who are born here and raised here like us, that represent both aspects, the American side and the Arab side, is something I'm really passionate about and didn't exist when I started Zesty. And so filling that void and being a positive role model for generations younger and older within the Arab American community is something I'm really excited about doing and passionate about. And I will just share this piece of it. My grandfather on my mother's side is my inspiration because his name was Minor George and grew up, in Cleveland, the son of Lebanese immigrants. But he was an Arab American leader there and actually helped Danny Thomas, who was a Lebanese actor and famous celebrity, but actually now probably more known for his work with St. Jude Children's Hospital. So Danny Thomas was actually from Toledo, Ohio. And my grandfather was born and raised in Cleveland. And so in the mid to late 50s, my grandfather helped Danny Thomas raise the initial funds to build St. Jude's Children's Hospital. The full story is on our website, and I'm super proud of it. But my grandfather, Minor George, was on the first board of St. Jude's Children's Hospital. His name and pictures are all down in Tennessee. So it's with that legacy, hope and heritage, as I like to call it, that I'm trying to build something a little bit bigger than Zesty.
So, Alex, I think you and I and most people would classify Arab Americans and people of Middle Eastern descent as part of a minority group. But it was interesting. You mentioned to me that industry groups and other organizations don't necessarily see it that way.
No, Ray, no, they don't. And this has been a point of frustration for me. And I want to make a certain caveat. There's a difference between, race and when you're filling out a questionnaire like a census in a government document for a classification on race. That is different than talking about diversity and minority, which over the past couple of years is an effort I really believe in. The world needs to be more flavorful. Immigrants bring a lot of value to this country, and from a historic point of view, as well as from a culinary point of view. And so promoting diversity and being inclusive is in the DNA of Zesty Z and, quite frankly, our heritage. You invite everyone to the table. So I just want to make that clear distinction. We're talking about diversity and minority status, not like a racial status or question. And so, as a minority, I do identify as that. I would say that Arab and Middle Easterns are a minority. When you're filling out applications, whether it be for category reviews, incubators, accelerators, financing things, and also for these third party certifying agencies, you know, you look at the criteria and it talks about minority status and it lists out, and I wrote one of the biggest ones, which I contacted, says you have to be 51% Asian Pacific, Asian Indian, Hispanic, Black, and Native American. So I contacted them and I said, what about Arab and Middle Eastern? And they said to me that they don't recognize that, as a minority. And I said on the phone to the woman, and it wasn't obviously the right contact. I said, you're joking. And I was almost incredulous. I mean, it was almost, like shocked. And then, when you see these wonderful initiatives for diversity, I'm kind of stuck in a pinch, because they either ask you, are you minority certified, which means you have to use one of these certifying agencies. Well, they don't recognize me as a minority, so I can't do that. So I'm, in a pickle, right? To use the food pun there. And then in some of the questions where they specifically ask, are you a minority, and list out various options or part of a diverse community, there's nothing there for Middle Eastern or Arab. And so you're kind of stuck. So like, what am I supposed to choose? Am I supposed to choose, African because Egypt is in North Africa? You have Morocco, you have Algeria, you have Tunisia. I don't do that, but I mean, could you logically go that route, by 6 degrees of separation? Am I supposed to, select Caucasian, which obviously is never there, and there's not a section for others. So, I want to be part of this diverse conversation, and it is very frustrating for me. And so, we're talking about minorities here, and you feel that Middle Eastern and Arab, are not being recognized out here. And for God's sakes, we gave you hummus, right? Put some respect on our name. Come on. You're joking here. You got Lebni that's trending. Zaatar it's trending. There's that joke. It's like there's that funny poster at one protest I saw. It's like, give us respect. We gave you hummus, we gave you falafel. We gave you shawarma. So, how is it? I find it very, not hypocritical, but it's like ironic. It's like, how are you embracing and really loving? And I love that people love those elements of our culture, but you're not giving us a seat at the table, to have those conversations. We're not being represented, accurately. And we're not asking for anything. And I'm not asking for anything other minority groups don't already have. I would just love a seat at the table and to be properly identified in this wonderful conversation about diversity.
Well, there's a lot of logic in what you're saying, Alex.
Oh, thanks.
I really enjoy speaking with you all the time, and this has been a real pleasure for me. I know our audience is really going to enjoy hearing from you and the inspiration that you bring to the industry. So once again, really appreciate the time. Good luck with everything going forward, and hopefully very soon we will connect in person. And I owe you a big hug for this. So thank you.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much for having me on this show and giving us, the chance and always being positive and embracing everybody at Notch, but you in particular. I know Mom and I really appreciate it. So thank you for helping make the world a little bit more flavorful.